I am really delighted to introduce our guest speaker this evening, who comes all the way from Israel, where he lives and has lived for over 40 years in Alon Shvut. Alon Shvut is located in Gush Etzion, which is south of Jerusalem, near the area of Efrat and Bethlehem. Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger is his name. Now, I met Rabbi Schlesinger a number of years ago when he came to Chicago to talk about this project that he's going to share with us. And an organization that he created at the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, called Roots. It is an organization that brings together Palestinians and Jews who live in the West Bank to try to create shared society. What's it like for us who live here together to figure out how we might create a peaceful society around us. As we know, many of us have been watching for many years with great hopes that there would be a peace process and some resolution of the conflict in Israel. And Rabbi Schlesinger and others felt we need to take things into our own hands and make sure that we're creating the society that we want here. And I heard him tell his story about how he became involved with Roots, that he had many years living in Israel, hadn't really met Palestinians. Yes, he knew them from stores and had interactions with them, but never had any deep relationship until 2013. And he came back from Israel. He came back to Israel. He had spent the 8 years prior to that in Dallas, Texas, where he was the head of a community, Kollel, and also founded a Jewish Studies Initiative of North Texas. And he came, and during that time, he was doing a lot of interfaith work and came back really committed to really getting to know his Palestinian neighbors. And they together created Roots in 2014. And he came and he spoke about it here, and then he also spoke at the Central Conference of American Rabbis a number of years ago. We were in Atlanta, and he spoke at that conference and was moved both times by what he had said. Fast forward a few years, and 2 years ago I was on sabbatical, and during my time on sabbatical in Israel, I decided to go and see Roots in action and actually go to Gush Etzion and to meet with people there. And I spent a wonderful, amazing afternoon and evening seeing the kinds of work that Roots does. When I first arrived there were a group of young American and Canadian boys who had just graduated from high school, and they were doing a year studying in yeshiva, and they'd come to meet and talk with Palestinians and Israelis who were working on issues of peace and justice together. After that conversation, what I didn't realize is that I actually, in some ways, met Rabbi Schlesinger even earlier than those few years ago that I talked about on those very public events. Even though we didn't meet each other personally, in 2014, there's an event that I organized here in Evanston that was in support of something that they were doing there. And it was right when Roots was starting, and I didn't even know that it was called Roots. I didn't know anything about this organization or that there was an organization, but they were doing something that I was so moved and motivated by that I organized an event in solidarity. And only on that day did I realize that it was these people who were doing this amazing work in this area who had created that. And what was that? In 2014, in July, you might remember that there was a war between Israel and Gaza. There were 3 Israelis who had been taken hostage and then killed. And a war broke out, and it was a very devastating and difficult time. And that period of the war was, in the Hebrew calendar, it was the month of Tammuz. And in the Muslim calendar, it was the month of Ramadan, which is actually today. We're starting the month of Ramadan. So this is b'shert that you're here at this time. And that in the Muslim calendar is a month-long fast in which from sunup into sundown, Muslims fast, and then they have each evening a large celebratory meal called an iftar, an ending of the fast meal. During the month of Tammuz, on the 17th day, the Jews, we also have a holiday in which we commemorate the breaching of the walls of the old city before the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed 3 weeks later on Tisha B'Av. And it is a fast day. And there was this group, Roots, and they had decided that we're going to fast as Jews and Muslims and then break the fast together for peace. And we're going to call it Choose Life, an expression from the book of Deuteronomy. And I read about it from a poet who had posted about it on Facebook, Eliaz Cohen. And I was so moved that Jews and Palestinians during a time of war were getting together to celebrate their shared traditions in many ways of fasting and of trying to create better, more peaceful society. And when I read about it, I thought, I want to do something in solidarity with this group. And so I organized very quickly, and I found some Palestinians and some other Muslims and Jews, and we gathered together in Fountain Square in downtown Evanston, and we put up the banner, the same banner that you were using at Roots, and we also had an event here. And it was only 2 years ago, as I was sitting there on this farm where Roots meets, and talking to one of Rabbi Schlesinger's colleagues, Shaul Yudelman, that I know that it was them. And Shaul and I were talking and having this conversation and just felt this deep spiritual connection with each other, that even though we didn't know each other from across the miles, we were working on this cause together. And Shaul turned to me and he said, "You created the event in Chicago?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "We were wondering all these years." And there I was, and felt that spiritual kinship so deeply with Roots. And after the afternoon, I also was taken out to dinner by Rabbi Schlesinger and his wife, and then we came back and there was an evening conversation with Jews and Palestinians grappling with the peace plan that Donald Trump had put forward at that time and what they thought of it and how they were still going to build their community together. And it was a most powerful, powerful experience, and I'm really impressed by the work that Rabbi Schlesinger and Roots is doing, and I'm delighted that he was able to come to Chicago and spend Shabbat with us, and he's going to speak tonight about his story and what they do, and tomorrow we'll have an opportunity for more interaction with him and with one of his Palestinian colleagues who couldn't make it in because of COVID restrictions, but we will be Zooming him in tomorrow. So between 12 and 1 tomorrow after Shabbat services, we'll have an opportunity to continue this dialogue with Rabbi Schlesinger and with Khalil Saged. Rabbi Schlesinger, it's so delightful to have you here today.
Thank you, Rabbi Andrea. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Mazal Tov to the Bar Mitzvah boy and to the Bar Mitzvah family and to the grandparents. Imagine this insane situation. Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs live in the West Bank, also called Judean Samaria, so close to each other, but so far away. When I say close to each other, I mean geographically. And when I say so far away, I mean in every other sense. Listen to this. The Jews and the Palestinians live in the West Bank, Judean Samaria, in separate towns and villages. You probably knew that already. They speak different languages. You probably knew that already. Different cultures, different religions. You knew that already. We also have separate health systems, whether it's the dentist, the doctor, hospitals, clinics, separate. Jews here, Palestinians here. Different transportation systems. That means taxis and buses, completely separate. Jews here, Palestinians here. The educational system, whether it's preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, completely separate. We have different calendars, the flow of time. Even at certain points, we have different times on the watch, because the two sides switch to and from daylight savings time in different days or weeks or months. Furthermore, there's so much more to say. Different municipalities. The people who pick up my garbage don't pick up their garbage. And of course, we also live under different legal systems. I am a citizen of the State of Israel, full civil rights, and the Palestinians, who are my quote-unquote neighbors, are citizens of no country with no rights. Under those circumstances, in which the two sides live so close together but so far apart, of course you have ignorance of the other, you have stereotypes and bigotry, You have what we might call racism. More than that, we have resentment and fear. The fear becomes part of our identities. You're not really a normal Israeli Jew living over there if you're not afraid of Palestinians. And you're not a normal, run-of-the-mill Palestinian if you're not afraid of the Israeli settlers. The fear is part of our identities. But I'm not finished with the bad news. There's no common ground. That's not a metaphor. Ground. There's no common ground literally. What do I mean? I mean that at the entrance to every single Israeli town, city, village, settlement in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, there's a guard. And the armed guard knows that Palestinians are forbidden from entering except if they're workers under armed guard during work hours with a work permit accompanied in and out by their employers. But a normal Palestinian cannot enter an Israeli town, settlement, city in the West Bank. And at the entrance to every single Palestinian village, city, town in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, there's a big red sign put up by the Israeli army. And it says that Israeli citizens, like me, are forbidden under military law from entering. Had there been a crazy Israeli and a crazy Palestinian that wanted to have a cup of coffee together, there's no place to do it. There's almost no place to do it. That was the case until 8 years ago and 2 months. 8 years and 2 months ago, we created Roots, in Arabic Shidor, in Hebrew Shorashim, the Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding, nonviolence, and transformation. And at the center of Roots, we created Merkaz Karama. Merkaz is a Hebrew word that means, anyone know? Center. And Karam is an Arabic word that means, anyone know? Dignity. The Dignity Center. The Dignity Center is the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank, Judea and Samaria. There's no other place where the two sides can and do meet every day in dignity and equality. We in Roots have in the Dignity Center every day social activities for the two sides. Religious activities like iftar dinners, like religious celebrations. We study together religion and politics. We have a youth group, we have a summer camp, we have photography workshops, we have music workshops, we have therapy, trauma therapy workshops. We learn about the others. We have every month lectures about the other side's religion and culture. We learn the other side's language. We have a high school youth group, 20 Israeli high school kids, 20 Palestinian kids, twice a month working together, learning about each other, discussing hard issues. I see human transformations taking place. We open up our hearts to include the other. At the end of so many activities, people come up to me and say, that was great. I say, what was so great? They say, you see that guy over there? You see that girl? I talk to them. To talk to the other side is surprising. They turn out to be a human being. You can talk to them. We learn to, through the experience of the people-to-people meetings, we humanize the other side, because the truth is, with all the ignorance and the fear and the hate, we demonize them. We hardly think they're human. It goes in both directions. I believe that Merkaz Karama, the Dignity Center, is a holy place. But more than that, it's also a mental health clinic. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, but I think that most Israelis and most Palestinians are sick. The disease, I've given a name. I call it the hubris of exclusivity. The hubris of exclusivity. It's a virus that infects our hearts and our minds, and it makes us think that our people are the only people in that land. Our connection to the land is the only connection to the land. Our truth, our story, our narrative is the only truth, story, narrative in that land. And when the two sides meet each other in the activities of roots at the Merkaz Karama, the Dignity Center, it's about humanizing the other, but it's not merely about humanizing the other. It's one step further. It's about meeting another human being in the fullness of his or her particular religious, national, cultural identity. And we hear their story. We hear their pain. We learn about their aspirations. And we slowly are healed from that hubris of exclusivity. We expand our identities. I still remain a Jew, a Zionist, a settler, deeply connected to the land of Israel. And the Palestinians remain Palestinian nationalists, Muslims mostly, some Christians, deeply connected to and believing in their own connection to land and their own truth. But we also expand our identities to include the truth of the other side. Most of the people in the land of Israel and in Palestine, it seems to me, believe that if you're right, I'm wrong. And we begin to realize that you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. It can be my land and it could be your land also. Our Jewish Zionist story of coming home after 2,000 years of exile can be and is true. But the Palestinian story is also true. It's also Palestine. That's a little bit of the wonderful, groundbreaking work that we do. It's deeply, deeply transformative. Tomorrow, myself and my Palestinian partner will talk about our personal stories, our journeys of moving from the place of the hubris of exclusivity, of blindness to the other side's humanity, the other side's truth, the other side's connection to the land, moving to a place of embracing my identity and his identity as well. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Hanan. You can all see his passion and enthusiasm and the amazing work, and important work that is being done. And without people really understanding and coming together, how can we really possibly create peace on the ground? And this is exactly what Roots is doing day in and day out at the Dignity Center. And tomorrow we'll really have an opportunity to ask questions and to dig in a little bit deeper. So we do hope you'll join us at noon. It'll just be for an hour, but this was a good introduction. But we'll, as I said, have time for more in-depth conversation tomorrow. But now we will continue.